got Mitch on.
All right, Friday afternoon, another edition of Sidelines. Rob Brown here with you, and we're going to have a whole lot of guests and good information on here. We're going to start off here in just a few minutes with Mitch Davis, University of Memphis Rivals.com reporter, and 3:30, Sonny Smith will fill us in on SEC basketball. And really no dominant team in the SEC, much less the rest of college basketball so far at this point. And long way to go, obviously, in the season. About 6 games into the SEC race, and it's wide open. All right, and 4 o'clock, we're going to have Uncle Charlie on here. Shane, we're going to talk about that proposal that he's come up with. It looks like someone's thesis for a master's or a PhD on the schedule, the SEC scheduling. It's a proposal to remake the way we do the scheduling to where if you stay 4 years at any SEC school, you will visit every stadium at least one time. I like this proposal. We'll get into that. 4:15, Jimmy Hodge is going to be on with us talking SEC and National College Football. And at 4:30, we'll have Coach Tommy Tuberville talking again more college football. And we will be trying to give you a lot of good information if you're listening AM 1600, 730 locally or on the TuneIn Radio app, iTunes Radio, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, Smart TV, Google. It's all over the place. We'd love to have you join us. 901-452-3094 and 901-324-7490 are our numbers.
You got Mitch.
And we're going to go straight now to Mitch Davis. And Mitch, ugly loss the other night for the Tigers, 40 points, losing to Tulsa. I know there's a lot of freshmen on this Memphis team, but you never like to get beat by anyone by 40 points. You never like to lose, period. But Tigers are, 14-4 right now? What do you see going on with this team?
This is a team that makes zero sense, and, we try to spin it as positive as we can. But this team is a team that goes out to Tulsa and gets beat by 40 points and has really struggled starting off games from the get-go. They've been very slow to start games, whether that's, maybe hitting 1 or 2 3-pointers to start the game and then going on a cold spell. We've seen it all season long, and Thursday night was actually the first time, or Wednesday night when it was the first time that I ever looked at Penny Hardaway on TV and said, this guy's seen his walk. He didn't know how to manage back his team. He didn't know how to corral his guys. And it really felt like that game got out of hand early, and Penny Hardaway and the Tigers had no answer for that Tulsa Golden Hurricane team.
Well, road games are never going to be easy. You get into the conference, no matter what, teams are going to be coming after you. Where the University of Memphis has been ranked in the top 10, but they suffered a home loss to Georgia a few weeks ago, but 21 lead changes in that game. Tulsa, they're good. They're good enough to beat you in every sport they play. We know James Wiseman. All that's behind us. This team has got to develop its own identity. Do you see that happening, or signs that it's happening?
I want to say that we do, but also on the flip side, if this was a good basketball team, they would not have gone down. You lose 10, 15 points, that's okay, but to lose to a Tulsa team who has 8, 9 losses by 40 points on the road, there has to be some kind of missing link there. And it seems like, every time that they take 2 steps forward, they take about 10 steps back. And, if you're a Tiger fan, you have to start wondering, hey, when are these good wins going to start coming in for the Tigers? Because they're running out of opportunities to get NCAA tournament quality wins. Their best win yet on the season is against Tennessee, and that's not really saying a whole bunch right now. So if you're Memphis, you start to worry, hey, are we going to make the NCAA tournament? Hey, are we going to get to that next level? And the questions are starting to hit Penny Hardaway and the Tigers right now.
Well, who do you see as the real X's and O's strategist? Obviously, Penny Hardaway, NBA career, great college career. he's a great recruiter. His name and University of Memphis is going to bring in a lot of talent. Then you got Mike Miller, 17-year NBA veteran, Tony Madlock. But is there anybody that is the mad scientist behind the curtain that can fix these problems that they've got right now, whether it's shooting, free throws, or whatever?
I think it comes down to Tony Madlock and Sam Mitchell, the two veteran head coaches on the coaching staff. I know they had failed attempts at Ole Miss and various other places, but those guys have been a head coach before. They've been around the block. So if I'm Penny Hardaway, if I'm Mike Miller, I go to Tony Madlock and I go to Sam Mitchell and say, Coach, what do I need to do to be a better head coach? Because the thing about it is, and what we're seeing is, there's a major, major difference between high school basketball and college basketball. And we're seeing that with Penny Hardaway. He's still not over that learning curve yet. And the time is running out where they can say, oh, well, we're just freshmen. We're just freshmen. The time is running out on those excuses. If you're a Memphis fan, as these losses continue to mount, it's hard not to get frustrated. But the future is pretty bright as far as recruiting goes and as far as the coaching staff goes. When you've got guys like Tony Madlock and Sam Mitchell on your bench, everything is in your corner. Penny Hardaway just has to go and take it.
All right, I'm going to I guess make a comparison. Last week I talked about Villanova and Jay Wright when he first got the job. For the first 3 years, they signed probably at least 2 5-star basketball recruits to Villanova each of those first 3 years. But they struggled to get above 500. Jay Wright and the Villanova staff realized they weren't recruiting the right kids to fit the Villanova model. Small private Catholic university in a big city in the Northeast. And they went after different kids, and the wins started coming. They've won 2 national championships in the last 5 years. Is Memphis possibly doing the same thing where they're getting kids that from all over the country, and they're getting some really, obviously last year's class ranked #1 in the country. Are they getting, though, the right kids that fit the University of Memphis model?
You know, I really think they are, but it's also very hard. I mean, people talk college basketball. It's so hard to get a group of 5-star athletes to compete with each other. You know, we saw it in Kentucky today with Khalil Whitney transferring out of Kentucky because he didn't want that competition to play with the 5-star recruits. And it's, when you have a bunch of just great athletes, it's hard to gel those guys because it's like, you know, they say, okay, hey, we were the best player on our high school team, and we deserve to have all this playing time. And so when you start getting those hot heads and you start getting those airheads, is when you start to have problems. And that's something that I see out of Memphis. You know, as of late, it's like, man, you know, these guys come out there and they bust their butt, but yet there's still that, hey, I'm the best player on the team, I don't want to give it up. And they have to become unselfish. The best games they played all season long was in the win over Cincinnati last week, where they distributed the ball well. DJ Jeffries had 18 points, Lester Quiones had 14, and Precious had 13. It needs to be a team effort rather than just 1 or 2 guys, like let's say Precious and Chua drop 30 points and nobody else gets above 6 or 7 points. You know, it needs to be a team effort for this Tiger team to be successful.
I agree, and I think that's a challenge that every coach faces when he brings in a lot of really talented players, and it sometimes just can't be done, and you get a lot of tempers flaring in the locker room. You either keep your team or you lose them in the locker room, in the practices. On game day, it's too late to really change that. All right, tomorrow Memphis plays SMU. Tigers are ranked 20th right now, and SMU, they're good enough again to beat you, and Memphis isn't a great team, and so they're vulnerable every time. The question now is, when you have this many talented players on a team, especially as many freshmen that are this talented, you run a risk of losing your team. You said that Penny looked lost against Tulsa the other night, and if you're a Memphis fan, you got to hope that he can remember, and he can, times in his career in high school, college, and the NBA. How did I bounce back from a horrible loss? Look, you know, the Lakers, you did a great podcast, by the way. I listened to it with ESPN analyst Jay Billis, who is as good of an analyst on college basketball as there ever has been. He is so smart, and he talked a lot about, hey, the 40-point loss by Memphis against Tulsa, The Lakers, the best team in the NBA Western Division, lost by almost 40 to the Celtics this past week. They've got the most talent of any team probably in the NBA. They get over it. Question is, these kids are a lot younger, and a lot of them have probably never lost 4 games in a season. You better get through to them and say, hey, man, as Coach K always told Jay Billis, I like that on your podcast, next play. You better move ahead and quit looking over your shoulder.
And that's the thing. That's so key for this Memphis team because the season's not over yet. Joe Lunardi still has them in the bracket as a 10 seed. But with the loss on Saturday, if they lose to SMU, they're going to be out of the NCAA tournament. And they have to realize that, hey, we've got to play with the spark underneath our butt to get us past the finish line. There is no more excuses. There is no more, he said, she said. There is. You have to come out here. You have to play for the front of the jersey. And you can't look back at other teams right now. It's so important to put that Tulsa loss behind you because if you don't, you're going to get caught watching the paint dry on the barn door thing.
Well, you can't let one loss beat you a second time. That's what it really boils down to. All right, let's switch gears. Go to Tiger football. Now, I've said this for a long time. In Memphis, for a long time, there was a half-hearted commitment by the University of Memphis to win in football. That commitment now seems to be all in, okay? They were allowed in the past there to be 2 separate camps, the Memphis football fans and then the basketball donors, the basketball fans. And they got the most attention, the most effort, the most attention and whatever from the University of Memphis. Look, football is so much bigger than basketball, it's not even funny. Memphis, and if college basketball, as much as I love it, were bigger than football, the arenas would be as big as football stadiums, okay? So let's talk about Tiger football. They got a lot of guys coming back. They lost their head coach. They lost some key assistants. But recruiting every year, guys are going to leave early, transfer. They're going to get injured. And recruiting is the lifeblood of the program. What's Memphis doing on the high school level, and who are some of the big JUCO names out there that Memphis is close with? Because we're coming up Wednesday, February 5th, for the second signing day, and that's the big one because that's it.
I can't name specific players, but I will say Memphis has got a lot of good JUCO local talent. They're going after guys from Northwest, guys from East Mississippi, guys around this 3 to 4 hour radius of Memphis. And Coach Schoenfield, Coach Jones, the running back coach, have done a phenomenal job getting into these schools. And I saw a couple of the coaching staff down in Louisiana yesterday recruiting, making a late pitch for a lot of these guys that maybe got overlooked by LSU, maybe got overlooked by Texas and Alabama and the other schools in that area. I want to play D1 football at a top level program, and then you see that a lot with this coaching staff. And these guys are, going out there and they're trying to bring in guys that will represent Memphis. But it's also very helpful for Memphis that they return Brady White, that they return Kenny Gainwell, that they return all of the talent from last year, with the exception of Antonio Gibson and TJ Card on the defensive side. For the most part, Memphis is going to be the same team that they were last year heading into next year's 2020 season.
Tell me, Ryan Silverfield was the offensive line coach. He'd been with Mike Norvell for a long time. And an offense like what the Memphis Tigers run, the offensive line has to be smart and quick. There's so much going on every play that a slow, lumbering offensive line would be the death of that offense. Talk about the returning offensive linemen, key players in that area for the Tigers going into spring practice, which is going to be here before we know it.
There's one guy that's actually going to be a freshman next year, Braxton Alford, offensive lineman. He signed his letter of commit, so we can talk about this guy. This guy on 24/7 is a 4-star recruit, and on Rivals, is a 3-star recruit. This kid from Alcoa, Tennessee, 285, 6'4", is going to be one of the best offensive linemen that Memphis has seen in a very long time. And I think Memphis turns to him to lead this offensive line unit. Memphis does lose a couple guys in the offensive line unit, but bringing in this Braxton Alford from Alcoa, Tennessee, I tell you what, this kid is a baller. He's going to be a complete player for this Tigers team.
All right. Special teams are always about 25-30% of every game. You know, Kenny Pollard gone to the NFL. He wasn't there this past year. He was with the Dallas Cowboys. And the Tigers have just been incredible on special teams the last few years under Mike Norvell. He's gone now. They're going to. Who's the next star on the team right now? Or maybe there's an incoming player they've already signed that you think is going to make a big difference.
You know, I've heard rumors that with the loss of Chris Claybrook, that Kenny Gainwell could be back there returning punts or returning kickoffs. Kenny Gainwell, as everybody knows, was probably one of the best running backs in the country last year. And Memphis is going to, Coach Lambeau and the special teams are going to play with the idea of moving him back there to do kick returns and punt returns. And that's not going to come to news to a lot of Tiger fans out there. But because of his explosiveness and because of the way that he can create his opportunities, Memphis is seriously looking at him to be the next Chris Claybrook back there for the special teams.
Well, special teams, it's just been incredible having a guy that returns as many kicks as Pollard did. But still, Memphis, their offense, the running, the passing, it's equally effective. And so, you know, with what they've got coming back, I think you're right. They're going to be a prohibitive favorite in the American Athletic Conference, them or Cincinnati, because Luke Fickell's done a really good job. Cincinnati won 11 games this year. Memphis won 12. It is maybe the most overlooked conference in America in college football. American Athletic Conference. It's really. I see really good football played there.
That's without a doubt. And looking ahead to Memphis' schedule next year, they open up with a very good Arkansas State team, and then they've got at Purdue the second week of the season, and they got a really weird road game at UTSA. And so the way that this schedule really sets up for Memphis, you're going to have a test with Arkansas State at the Liberty Bowl, and then at Purdue is going to be a test. But they also got USF coming to Memphis. They go to Cincinnati, and they've also got UCF on the schedule, back on the schedule, and they're going to be playing that one in Liberty Bowl. And so, yeah, I agree. This American Athletic, and I've said this to a bunch of people, the American Athletic is just as good as the Pac-12. It's not better. Pac-12 and the AAC are basically in the same even playing field across the board.
Well, I'll tell you what, watching college football, the Pac-12 is in trouble. Of the ESPN top 300 college football players in this year's rankings, only 40 of those 300 were from the geographical footprint that is the Pac-12. And 21 of those kids were in California, and a lot of them left. Southern Cal, you saw what happened to their recruiting year. The media and the narrative out there that the new athletic director was going to get rid of head football coach Clay Helton, who was here at Memphis for a long time. They had like the 85th ranked recruiting class, probably the worst in Southern Cal history. That conference is in trouble. Oregon is building an SEC superpower Clemson type model out there. Mario Cristobal, great. He's a heck of a coach. They won 11 games, actually 12 games this past year, 12-2 with that 28-27 win over Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl. And by the way, Mitch, a lot of the bowl games are just being nullified by the playoff. But the one road game, the Rose Bowl, still draws incredible attention. And that's the next big trip. If somehow the Tigers could get in that one, maybe that's just in the playoffs. But they've played out there. And Mitch, I'm going to go back to 2014 before I let you go. Do you remember the Memphis-UCLA game? It was like 49-42. That's when I told a lot of longtime Memphis fans that I thought the Tigers would win 9 or 10 games in the 2014 season. They said, how do you know? I said, I don't know for sure, but I think this team is different than any Memphis team I've seen in recent, at least in this millennium, and they have not looked back. The Tigers are 57-23 in the last 6 seasons, okay? They're averaging 9.5 wins a year. These are great times, and if you love the University of Memphis, Mitch, people need to follow your site on Rivals.com, but they also need to start writing checks to help the university build their athletic programs up, because The only thing you're going to get for free, maybe, well, you might get that revenue sharing check from the conference, but you got to write the big checks if you want to have the best facilities, because it is an arms race. It's a beauty pageant, Mitch. And if you don't have the best facilities and the latest, newest, best looking, you're falling behind quickly, aren't you?
Without a doubt. And you see that across college football, and you see that in the AAC. Everybody's playing catch up to UCF right now in the conference. UCF has the best football facilities in the conference. And now you see Memphis and Cincinnati closing that gap on the Golden Knights.
Yeah, it is. It's an arms race. Mitch, look, again, tell people how they can follow you and also hear your podcast that you did last night with Jay Billis of ESPN on college basketball. Great stuff.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, MitchDavis_8, Tiger Sports Report. I'm also starting some SEC work at nohuddlesports.com covering college basketball for them. And I'm on Twitter, MitchDavis_8. And wherever you like to listen to your podcast, simply type in The Mitch Davis Show. You can be able to hear the interview with Jay Bill.
All right. Hey, thank you so much. I look forward to having you on again next week. And good luck for the Tigers tomorrow against SMU.
Thank you so much. Go Tigers. Have a great weekend.
All right, you too. All right, before we take this commercial break, I want to say a couple of things about some of our sponsors, Pimentos and Holiday Ham. Pimentos, I'm in here eating right now these sliders, these burgers. They are so good, incredible. I mean, you don't realize the pimento cheese and Holiday Hams that they have it at Pimentos, they put it on burgers with their honey-cured bacon. If you like the honey-baked hams at Holiday Ham, you will love the bacon that they put on their burgers. It's incredible. Pimentos, 6450 Poplar Avenue. They're open now on Sundays as well till 9 o'clock, as they are every other night. Margarita Mondays, and they also have, your quesadillas. Tuesday, beer and burgers. Also 3715 South Houston Levee. And Pimentos, incredible catering. We had the taco bar at the board meeting for the new Rely yesterday. It is great, great food. They're across the street from another one of our sponsors, Rocky's Alterations, 1866 Poplar Crest Cove behind Mecca Eye Care. And if you have anything, men's and women's clothing, they can do the alterations. If it can be done with a needle and thread, Rocky's can do it. They have great suits, sport coats, blazers, dress shirts, dress pants for men. Take it to Rocky's Alterations. You know his uncle, Richard Capadia, was at Joseph A. Bank for a long, long time, and Richard retired a couple of years ago. Now Rocky, his nephew, has taken over. They're as good as it gets. Rocky's Alterations. We'll take a commercial break and be right back with Sonny Smith talking some SEC college basketball. He said in winter 1960.
452 309. Yes.
That's one of the better songs that they ever did, the Fat Bottom Girls. Been around a long time. All right, Rob Brown back here with you on Sidelines. We're going to be joined here in just a moment by Sonny Smith, the former basketball coach at Auburn. Before that, East Tennessee State, Virginia Commonwealth, currently SEC, the color analyst on the Auburn Basketball Network. And we are 6 games into the SEC race so far, and you can say it's a wide open race, Coach. It's early, but really, have you seen a dominant team? I know Auburn started off with a 15-0 record, had a couple of losses last week at Alabama and Florida, bounced back Wednesday night against South Carolina, but it's a long way to go.
I think LSU's been the dominant team at this point. I think Kentucky's right on their heels. And I think you have a hard time from there down, including us, to see who 3, 4, 5 is. You know, is it us? Is it Tennessee? Is it Arkansas? Is it, you know, who is coming on? And I think of the teams coming on, we are. And I think Tennessee's staying strong. So I think the two of us, the most dangerous team, I think, is Alabama. Alabama's got super talent. I don't know how they get by, but not getting them rated as high as they do. But Petty's the best shooter in the league. And the offense they're running is great for everybody because they got a great point guard. So you got to watch out for Alabama. I'd say Alabama, Tennessee, and Auburn, hunting Kentucky and LSU.
Yeah, Alabama, I think I heard the other day on a show talking about the comparison, Auburn's players versus Alabama's, and said, well, as far as the top 6 players that Alabama has, every bit as good, maybe a little bit better because of people like Petty.
Well, every one of them were higher rated than that guys, except Okoro. Yeah. One more there now. Wiley, Austin Wiley was rated awfully high.
Yes.
And I don't know. I don't know anybody else will be rated over anybody that they had.
Yeah, so
Okoro definitely is.
Yeah, he's really good out of Powder Springs, McEachern High School, and of course he's got his teammate Sharif that was just named McDonald's All-American this week coming in for next year. Nate Oates came from Buffalo his first year at Alabama. They're playing more of an up-tempo versus talk about and again, you're brilliant with basketball, you know it. Talk about the differences though with Avery Johnson, what he did in his 4 years at Alabama, and why Nate Oates is having success early. And maybe a lot of people didn't expect it, but he's certainly having success.
Well, Avery was a good coach. A lot of people vouched for him and talked good about him, but he ran a half-court sets, a lot of pro half-court sets. Well, the players didn't, I don't know whether they didn't like it or not, they didn't respond to it well enough. And people must have been scouting those plays and making them difficult to score. Now, this guy's come in and he's freedom. He's running with the ball all the time, and he's got a motion offense, which I don't know if it has a lot of numbers with it to change up things. And it's a total different attack, and I think they've responded to it better than they did what Avery Johnson was putting out there.
You've seen Florida play. They put it to Auburn last week, 69-47. They always have a good team at Florida. What is it about this team?
I went crazy there when I was naming those teams a few minutes ago, but I'd have to put Florida right in there with Auburn, Tennessee, and them to hunting that LSU Kentucky bunch. Florida is for real. They are really for real, and they got a good bench to go with it, and they got young people that's starting to come around that I didn't expect to. So it's another team that's going to put a big fight up for who's in that top four.
All right. You mentioned early on that you thought Will Wade is a heck of a coach, and he's won everywhere he's ever been. And look what he's doing right now: 6-0 LSU, has 14-4 overall, 10-1 at home, 3-1 on the road. And wow, they're they're on a 7-game winning streak. They're 6-0 in the conference. What is it about him? And we all know about the problems last year. We didn't know if he was even going to be the coach. He wasn't for a while, but they brought him back. What's going on? I know you can't read his mind, but what's he telling that team, because it's working, to keep them together and not be distracted?
I don't think there's a distraction in Louisiana about it. Distractions come from the visiting schools. I think that he has great rapport with his team. I think he works them hard. I think he's got discipline on that team, and he's got a great shooter. And his name escapes me. Sharp is one of them, but the main one is This is a senior that I can't name for you. Maybe you can help me out there. He's and they got a postman inside that can really control things, Williams. And I think that they, on any given night, LSU could beat anybody in the country.
Yeah, they're really good, and tough place to play as well. Now let's switch over. Arkansas, they've lost a couple of games, and they're still pretty good record right now. They're 14-4, 3-3 in the SEC. And Eric Musselman has been talking about the struggles of. It's been a long time since he's lost 2 games back to back in Nevada. Of course, he's got a career. He's been in the NBA. He's seen a lot of basketball in his time. You think part of it's just the learning curve of getting into the SEC and people not realizing that everybody, as you have said, the days of the football-only schools in the SEC are long gone. Everybody's really pushing basketball.
Now, we're speaking of Arkansas now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Let me tell you, Eric Musselman has been a winner all his life. Anywhere he goes, he wins. He finally got that high Division I job at Nevada and made it big. His father has been a great teacher of the game, and he's got 2 of the best players in Joe and Jones on that Arkansas team. The only problem they got is they may not be big as the other teams, but they are quick and very athletic and really have 2 really good shooters. So I think I don't think they're a threat to be a big time winner, but I think they're a threat to beat somebody every night out if they get it. If they get on a roll.
Yeah, you're right. Let's look down here in the bottom of the SEC right now. It's kind of a surprise to see Ole Miss at 0-5 in the conference right now. 9-9, second year under Kermit Davis. Such a great teacher. I know they lost some players. They had a much better year last year than anyone expected. He was SEC Coach of the Year. You think they can fix and turn the ship around, or are they just going to have a rough season? They don't have the players. What do you think?
I think Tyree is not enough. I think he's a great player and can really put the points on the board, but I don't think they have enough people to back him up. And so I think that maybe if he can get it into a half-court game and play slow and not get it up tempo to where his guys might get in foul trouble trying to defend and run with it too, because of the depth is kind of low. I think Kermit is a winner, and he knows how to win, but he just doesn't have the players everybody else does right now.
Yeah, and I know they got some in recruiting in the early period in November, but of course they can't help them until next year. But
Kermit won't be without players long. You can bet on that.
I agree. And
he's an outstanding coach. I believe. Don't take me wholly on it, but I believe he might have been the coach of the year in the league last year.
He was. He was.
He's a total package now. Kermit is. His father was also a very good coach.
That's right. He's got the DNA. I think he'll turn around. And they play at the Pavilion. You've been there. I've been there. It is a great place. It's a lot like the Auburn Arena. Their fans are right on top of you. It's really loud. I mean, Andy Kennedy had in his 12 years, he averaged about 21 wins a year, and did a.
Oh yeah.
Andy's
that's a good job.
Yeah.
You're in an area where you can still recruit the really good players in Mississippi. You're close to Memphis, where the best players, you look around the country and say, what cities turns out basketball players? You got to think in Memphis is in that conversation. I don't know what position, but they're in that conversation, and they can get Memphis players. I don't know how hard Memphis is going to make it on people to get players out there now, but there's plenty enough for everybody else too, though.
Yeah, there's. I got a question now for you. We were talking about Memphis with our University of Memphis reporter for Rivals.com, Mitch Davis, and he did a podcast last night I listened to with Jay Billis of ESPN, and Jay's really good. And Jay, he was asked, do you see a dominant team in college basketball this year? And he said, not really, but it's not a bad thing. It's actually exciting because night in and night out, everybody is vulnerable. There's just, and he didn't think either that there was a dominant player like Zion Williamson at Duke last year, but there's some really good ones out there. So give the big picture. Memphis right now, Penny's the big name. Everybody knows him. He had the #1 ranked recruiting class. We know what happened with James Wiseman. What do you think, having coached a long time and you know so much basketball, what do you think's going on in that locker room? Wiseman, he's gone. They tried to build a team. He was a centerpiece, but he was a true freshman. They got beat by 40 the other night. What are you telling them, and what do you think they're doing?
They are in a league that's not overly strong. It's good. And which means that they still got a chance to win every night out at home. And I don't know how they play on the road. Who beat them last?
Tulsa by 40 points.
Who did?
Tulsa.
Oh,
yeah.
That is a surprise.
Yeah.
With that much points. But anyway, I think that he's got the talent enough that he's going to end up with a winning record. He's going to be able to hold people off until he gets those recruits in there. And I think that he's a much better coach than everybody thinks. Just like some people said Stackhouse, being a pro coach, couldn't do it in it, but he's really an outstanding coach too. You got three coaches in the state of Tennessee. All three are outstanding.
Yeah, and Jerry Stackhouse came from the Memphis Grizzlies. This is his first year in college. And speaking of Vanderbilt, they're at 0-5 right now in the league. Last year with Bryce Drew, they really struggled. And coming from the NBA, where you're dealing with professionals, they get a paycheck every week for playing the game. Now you're back in college, and he's got Scottie Pippen's son on there. He'll probably be able to recruit some big-time players off his name and his relationships as well. But how are they going to fix Vanderbilt? I know that's a place. Alabama won there for the first time in a month of Sundays a couple of nights ago. And last year was the first year they ever had a losing season at Memorial Gymnasium in Nashville, the Commodores. That's never happened.
Well, as you've watched them now, they're not really great right now. They got some people that can shoot to us. Saban Lee hurt us a lot, and I cannot put my name on the other guard, but they were pretty solid at both those positions. But they didn't seem to have enough on the perimeter other than them to really whip up on people, and the post players inside were not great enough to carry when the perimeter people aren't shooting. So I think it's a situation where they're just one more year away from players.
Yeah, let's talk about this weekend, SEC Big 12 Challenge. And Tennessee is on, they're going out to play Kansas. And well, we all know what happened with Kansas and Kansas State. By the way, Coach, what would you have done if you'd have been Bill Self? It's tough to say that, but that hand real fast. It looked like, it reminded me of studio wrestling with Jerry the King Lawler and Lance Russell and Dave Brown here at Channel 5 in Memphis with the guy coming with the chair.
Yeah, well, here's the way I would look at that situation with the way things are today. I would wait until the league made a decision on the players, and if it was not a solid, hard decision, I'd add to it. And if it was really too hard, I would just say that I thought it was hard, and I'd let it go at that. But I don't think that the league's going to let them. I think they've already got the one kid for like 8 to 12 games, don't they?
It's going to be, I think, 12 games. You're right.
12 games, yeah. Now you take that kind of thing. You don't. I don't think you want to increase it much more than that because everybody looks up and says, "What man? That was a." They really put it to that kid. Well, when you go up in the stands and you're caught with a chair in your hand, you might as well be looking on that season is washed out for you right there.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't know how many games they got left in the season, but I don't know if they'll even get him back in time to really help him in postseason play because they're going to go regardless.
Yeah. All right, real quick before we let you go, and your thoughts on this SEC Big 12 Challenge. Iowa State comes to Auburn. Obviously, Tennessee, we mentioned, is going to Kansas. Kansas State coming to Alabama. What are some of the matchups that you see in there that really get you excited?
Yeah, the one
what can we
that
tell?
intrigues me a little bit there is the Auburn Iowa State thing.
Yeah.
Iowa State's got a point guard that's going to be highly drafted. He's going to be a first rounder, and he's 6'6", and they better be scared of Iowa State. Iowa State can score points in bunches. Now, whether they can defend good enough to beat Auburn, I think that's a real question. And here's the biggest thing about that challenge. It's right in the middle of league play. And when you're right in the middle of league play, you don't want to be thinking about out-of-league games that are extremely tough.
Yeah.
So what may happen here is you may not get up for a game with one of those Big 12 schools, and they put the whooping on you. You could look at that. You could look at Iowa State and say, well, their record's 500. But they play an extremely tough league, but they can shoot the ball. So if you're not ready to play, Iowa State could beat Auburn. Now, you can ask me some of the other challenges. I can't remember.
Well, Kentucky and Texas Tech.
What else? What else do you consider?
Well, I like that Texas Tech and Kentucky. We all know Texas Tech played
for
the national championship last year and lost to Virginia, but that coach has done a heck of a job building that program up. And Kentucky is Kentucky. We all know they're the 800-pound gorilla in the room. That it doesn't matter. They seem to get better, obviously, with the freshmen they play so many of as the year goes on. But what do you think about that game? And what can we really tell about either team?
Texas Tech's defense is so good. Mm-hmm. Kentucky's going to have trouble scoring, and they're going. I don't know if Kentucky's inside players are good enough to win that game for them. Because the perimeter players are going to be defended so well by Texas Tech that it's going to be hard to score points. But so those big people they got, E.J. Montgomery, and those guys are going to have to come through. Richards, who is it? I'm missing the one I want to talk about. And they got 3 inside guys that probably can hurt Texas Tech. And Texas Tech is such a good at guarding people 5-on-5, and you got to worry about this is a game is can you outscore them, can you beat them with second shots with your perimeter people, and that's what I think of it. I think that game's going to come down to that.
Yeah, like I said, we got a long way to go. Obviously, the next week in January, and then February, March, so about 2.5 months to go. Last question is, what can you tell about your team at this point, and what are things that it's just too late, you can't fix them, and you have to just suck it up and move forward?
Well, one more thing before I go, I'll say this. Right at this break in the season, you got to make sure that you don't overwork your players the rest of the way, because you give them there's a number of games start to mount up on them. And if you keep your practices too hard, you got to go lighter towards the end of the year. And if you do that, your players will be fresh, and your players will be able to end. I look at Bruce Pearl. Bruce Pearl, the minute the league starts, he will lighten up unless it's a loss that he's kind of getting their attention on, like the 2 he had. He was lighting his practices up as we go down the line here. And I think that's a good thing. I think fatigue loses games for you, and it wins games for people that don't have it.
After a loss, did you ever find yourself guilty of working the players really hard, almost as punishment? Okay, so
Yes, I've done that.
Yeah.
I'm so mad the next day I run them through the gauntlet, and I'm guilty of that.
Yeah,
I think most coaches are.
Yeah,
the real smart ones will take care of their bodies and limit their practice time. They'll do it. And I learned after a few years that you better do that.
Yeah, that's a great.
You don't only have 6 players or 7 players doing all your playing.
Yes.
They're going to get fatigued more than people that use 9 or 10 guys. Now, Kentucky uses a lot of people, and a lot of people do it. I thought Florida managed their players. I thought Tennessee manages their players late. But see, if you could just got 5 or 6 that can play, managing is more than a problem.
You're right.
Like Auburn has not been getting any scoring off the bench, and all of a sudden, Devin Cambridge steps up and hits 6 threes.
Yeah.
And that really was the thing that Auburn needed. When you say you're playing Auburn, well, if you get into their bench, you can beat them. Well, you got into the bench the other night, and that guy just put a serious whooping on them. So we'll just have to see. I'm going to have to go.
Oh, I know. Hey, look, Coach, thank you so much. I was going to say, we appreciate it. Look forward to having you next week, and good luck tomorrow against Iowa State.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Same
here. Thank you so much. All right, let's take a quick commercial break here. We'll be right back. 4 o'clock, we're going to have Uncle Charlie on here talking about, he's got a proposal that he's come up with on his own about redoing the SEC football schedule to where everybody plays each other more frequently. We'll be right back with more on Sidelines. We'll get back to the talk before we go to Uncle Charlie's talk about more high school talent. Uncle Charlie stay on like that. I've got this.
Cargo safe. Cargo safe.
Where's the best liquor deal?
Cargo safe. Cargo.
You know what
And then you look at Villanova, who was recruiting like that, and when they weren't, I'm not saying they don't have talent, but they've got guys that fit their model. I don't know what the Kentucky model is. Kentucky wins. They are to college basketball what Alabama is to college football. Okay? It's unbelievable. And LSU really has been in college baseball. Especially at tournament time, they get to be really good. But I think the SEC, Shane, is a league that is getting better. Eric Musselman talked about him at Arkansas. They've lost 2 games in a row. It's been long. He's not used to losing. They're 14-4 though. It's a lot better than it was under Mike Anderson. And I think he was never going to overcome being the understudy to Nolan Richardson. But the 17 years Nolan Richardson was at Arkansas, it was 40 minutes of hell every time you played them. Absolutely. And their fan base is rabid. I read a great quote, by the way, Shane, about Arkansas. There was a player, Ebony Jones, out of Metro Marietta, Atlanta area, running back who had committed to Tennessee back in April, then committed to the Maryland Terrapins, who's now committed to the Arkansas Razorbacks. And you know what he said? This is something that's powerful, and it sums up the way Arkansas is. And a lot of school, but he said, hey, I was told by Sam Pittman and the Arkansas coaches, I didn't just commit to Arkansas, I committed to the state of Arkansas. That's pretty powerful stuff. And this is a kid from Georgia that I'm sure Sam Pittman had a prior relationship with. Sam Pittman is quietly, they have 18 recruits for the Razorbacks right now. And look, the last couple of years, they haven't won a league game. They are 13-51 in the SEC in the last 8 years. That coincides directly the 8 years that Texas A&M has been a member of the Southeastern Conference. Razorbacks had a lot of success. I think they were 37, 38, and 26. 38 and 26 in the 8 years prior to A&M joining the league. I keep saying this, but it's true. They've got to overcome these kids in Texas that a lot of times would come to Arkansas and LSU, especially Arkansas, are staying and going to Texas A&M. Jimbo's in his 3rd year with a $75 million guaranteed contract. And they won 8 games this year, went 8-5. That's what Kevin Sumlin did. 11-2, 9-4, and then a bunch of 8-5s, and he's out of there. Texas A&M, look, they got a lot of money, a lot of wealthy boosters. They cannot afford, though, to just dump a guy. But what do they expect at Texas A&M? Jackie Sherrill had really good success. 1988, 2002, R.C. Slocum had a lot of success. They've yet to make it to Atlanta. They've only been in the league 8 years, but they still hadn't made it. Arkansas, in their 4th year in the SEC, 1995, made it to Atlanta and played Florida. But they got there. That was the one good season Danny Ford had when he replaced Jack Crow, who Big Daddy, Frank Broyles, gave a bear hug to after the Citadel loss on the field in Fayetteville and was fired.
Charlie.
So, a lot of things happening. We'll see what Arkansas does. We're going to talk about them later. Let's go down to Monroe, Louisiana, talk to our next caller, Uncle Charlie. And Uncle Charlie, I know you've been working in your lab, underground in your bunker. This proposal looks like something along the lines of a thesis for a doctoral program, a PhD in nuclear physics. Talk about this because I'm with you, and it gained a lot of momentum. You brought this up back in early October, back when Auburn was playing at Florida. That's a rivalry that was one of Auburn's 2 or 3 oldest, and it was renewed. Auburn lost that one 24-13, but it was just a fun game. Auburn recruits the state of Florida. A lot of years, they sign more kids out of Florida than they do Georgia or Alabama. But really, let's talk about this proposal to where everybody in the SEC will play everybody more frequently in college football.
Yeah, because, you brought up Auburn, Florida, and they're not going to play again for, I think it's 6 years, and then, not in Gainesville again for 12 years. The proposal is just, like you said, the goal of playing these cross-divisional opponents more frequently, and you really got to get rid of the divisions in order to do it. And assuming we stay at 8 conference games a year, I know there's been some talk about going to 9, but for the sake of this discussion, let's just say staying at 8 games. You get rid of the divisions, similar to how they did in basketball. And in basketball, there are 3 permanent opponents, and that, for the sake of basketball, that just means they play each team twice, the home and home, within a season, and rotate. I think it's 2 others where they do a home and home and rotate through the rest of them. Well, in this scenario in football, you would have 3 permanent opponents. You could go to 4 or 5, and that just just gives you kind of different scenarios as far as frequency of playing the other teams. But if you have 3 permanent opponents, then there's 10 more schools you have in the rotation. And if you play 5 of them, either home and home for 2 years and play them 2 years and 2 years off, or you could play 5 and have a year off and play the other 5, and then have a year off and complete that home and home with each. But in either way you do that, you play each of those 2 teams, a home and home, in a 4-year period. And of course playing your permanent opponents every year. And there's a lot of great things about it. Most notably, every 4-year, college athlete that plays football gets to play each team in the conference at least twice and play at each campus at least once in their 4 years.
Yeah, and I think you've made some really good points in what I've read of your dissertation and your proposal. Is it some of these schools like Missouri that are new, they don't even feel like they're part of the conference. They've never played a game. I know at Auburn. Auburn's played up there one time. They played in the SEC championship in 2013 in Atlanta, the second year Missouri was in the league.
Right.
But I think it's good for recruiting. It's also good for the fan bases to get to make these road trips, because I believe you've been to every opponent stadium, you being a Tennessee fan and graduate all your life. You've been to every SEC stadium at least once. You made that complete. You completed the journey this year when you went up there to Columbia to see Tennessee beat Missouri. And that's exciting, and that's what fan bases love to do, and that's how we get close. Is the travel and the proximity from Missouri, though, to Florida is tough. But, hey, Florida's won a couple of times in Gainesville where they have flat out trounced the Gators.
Oh, yeah, Missouri. Yeah, they sure did. I mean, they came in like gangbusters the first 2 years and were in the SEC championship, winning the East when the East was down. But, it is. I mean, I really enjoy going to other campuses. We've only played A&M once. It was in College Station about, 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was fantastic. One of the greatest games I ever have seen. And we lost, but Josh Dobbs and, Alvin Kamara, they just tore it up. I mean, it was unreal. What a great game. And what a great stadium. I mean, the fans were just so gracious and, glad to be in the SEC. And you get that just about everywhere. I mean, there's one fan base that, here and there that it's not as hospitable maybe. For me, it's always been Florida. But everywhere else, you get treated real well, and people appreciate, having fans come to see, their campus and enjoy, being Southern host, our Southern hospitality comes out. But it's just a great experience. I had a great time down in Auburn with you and your son down there last year, but it'll be 12 years before, we can even have the opportunity to possibly do that. And then something could come up on that weekend, an unforeseen thing or a wedding or something that, preclude you from going, and then it's another 12 years before, you get to see a Tennessee-Auburn game in Auburn. And so it's just, I think, of course, you got to look at the potential objections, losing the divisions and not having two clear divisional champions for your SEC championship game. But, so what? You take the top two teams and they play. You might have a little bit more frequency of repeat games in the championship, that they played in the regular season already. But, again, so what? You're playing everybody more frequently, so that would be bound to happen, most likely. So it's just, I think that would be the main objection. And then, of course, you would lose certain rivalries, but we lost them with the first expansion as well. We lost Tennessee-Auburn as a annual rivalry. As you said, Auburn and Florida that was lost in '92 when we had the first expansion, bringing in South Carolina and Arkansas, and Tennessee and Ole Miss was lost. That just is going to happen. The world didn't come to an end when the Big 8 went to the Big 12 before it now is, I guess, the Big 12 with only 10 teams. But you lost Oklahoma and Nebraska on an annual basis.
We did.
Tough. But, still, you lose a rivalry, you still maintain your three top ones. I think we could, everybody could arrive at that. If you go to 4 permanent opponents or 5 permanent opponents, you would definitely get everyone in there. But so you may lose some annual games you're playing now that mean a lot to certain people, but you're still going to play them 2 out of every 4 years, which is, a lot more than a lot of these teams are playing each other right now.
Yeah, well, let's talk about this. I think that it creates a lot of disinterest. Right now, the SEC West is viewed as the strongest division in the toughest conference in all of college football. Okay?
It used to be the East.
Yeah. The SEC West has won 10 of the last 11 championship games. The lone championship by the East was in 2017 in the rematch between Auburn and Georgia over in Atlanta. And it was a home crowd that day for Georgia, and they were just clearly better than Auburn. Auburn just couldn't beat them. Lost 28-7. Alabama went on to play a month later in the national championship game there in Atlanta and lost on that play when Tua Tagovailoa hit Devontae Smith on that touchdown after they had thrown Alabama for a huge loss. Now, speaking of that, I'm just going to go out and say I think Georgia, Kirby Smart's had 3 straight years of winning the SEC East. His record after 4 years is almost identical to what Mark Richt accomplished in his first 4 years. Similarities are you had David Green as your quarterback at Georgia the first 4 years when Mark Richt was at Georgia. You've had Jake Fromm the last 3 years at Georgia out of Houston County High School in Warner Robins, Georgia. Now, Jake Fromm is declared for the NFL draft. He did come in January early and went through spring practice. So I always like to say those guys are sort of put an asterisk out to the side of them. If you go through spring practice and all that, you're really not a true freshman. You are in terms of playing real opponents, but you're a leg or two up on all the other guys that don't do it. But I think that Georgia's run in the SEC East is going to be challenged in a big way this year by Florida and Tennessee. And don't discount the Kentucky Wildcats with Mark Stoops. He has built and is continuing to build a culture of winning football at Kentucky. There's a lot of money up there in Kentucky. You look at their recruiting class this past year, back in December, Kentucky had 5 signees out of Ohio, I think 4 in Michigan, and 4 out of Kentucky. and then they got a bunch of kids in the Deep South, 1 or 2 in Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi. But the SEC East is gaining a lot of power, and Jeremy Pruitt won that sack full, 24 crystals on the 8 wins. And again, we can easily say, Uncle Charlie, well, if Tennessee would have beaten Georgia State in the first game and BYU in that second game, they'd have been 10-3. Well, you also don't know how fired up and motivated they would have been to win those other games, because your record is what it is. Jeremy Pruitt the players typically, with the great programs, the players take on the personality of the head coach.
Right.
And so that's what's happened with Tennessee. And Dan Mullen, Lane Kiffin, Mike Leach, the best quarterback coaches probably in all of college football. All right? Now, keep in mind, they had a lot of different coaches over the years, by the way, at the University of Washington. But they had about 19 out of the 20 quarterbacks who started there for over a period that ended it's still alive. It's even more. Went on to play in the NFL. I don't know how the Huskies at the W do it out there, but it's amazing. The Huskies program, Don James really built that culture.
Right.
By the way, I'm shocked that Chris Peterson left. He had success at Boise. He didn't have it in the Pac-12 with Washington. I think the Pac-12 is suffering from population shift. That's another topic for another show, but they've got real problems. Larry Scott has not been a great leader for the Pac-12, so they got their problems. But SEC East, Uncle Charlie, I want to get rid of the divisions because, and I want you to talk about this, you feel like a lot of the teams and their fan bases don't even feel like they're part of the SEC because of the lack of playing some of these, especially their old rivals, on an annual or every other year basis.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when you play, once every 6 years and once every 12 years on each other's campus, how can you feel like you're in the same conference? I mean, it's all those players, they go, their whole 4-year career without ever playing, several of the teams in that scenario. Probably 3 teams they would not ever play.
Yeah.
2 or 3 anyway, and then certainly not, in any kind of home and home scenario. So it's just, you don't feel like you're in the same conference. We've played A&M once. I mean, how long have they been in the conference now? I mean, that's
8 years.
Yeah. And it's 2 more years till we play them in Knoxville for the first time. So, or 3 actually, 3 more years, I believe.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure, but it's not. Maybe it's 2 years actually. Regardless, it's just not enough. And I think you would get a much more balanced top to bottom. I think by playing each other more frequently, it would just be of more interest to everybody, to recruits, to you could have somebody come to an SEC school in either division. Say somebody from Alabama for some reason wants to go to Georgia and would, but gosh, we don't play Georgia for another 5 years unless we meet them in the SEC championship. Maybe that's not the best example because that's a fairly likely scenario. But if you're going to play them at least twice in that 4-year period, then that's a lot more appealing. And the fan bases, I mean, they would.
Jimmy Hodge.
I don't know how anybody couldn't like that.
I agree. Uncle Charlie, I want you to hold the line here. I'm going to bring in Jimmy Hodge, one of our callers, football expert, analyst. I love him. I've been listening to him and his calls for years, talking some college football, and get Jimmy's perspective. But before we do this, we're going to take a quick commercial break. I want to remind you, Jimmy, hold the line. Uncle Charlie, hold the line. We're going to talk more about this SEC scheduling realignment proposal. But I want to say something real quick. Thank you to our title sponsor, Duncan Williams Asset Management. Check them out on our website at DWAM, Duncan Williams Asset Management. They are here for you. You'll hear a lot more about DWAM in the future. They are Memphis strong. We'll be right back. This is Sidelines, 4:15 on a Friday afternoon. We'll be back with you more college football. We don't want them to pick a point, right? Yeah. You like that photo on the camera? I like it. I love it. I mean, he always wrote this shit.
If you have a crash, sit or ding, go to GE Patterson and baby jeans. The Walmart and Body Shop.
I'm taking one of your little sandwiches.
Your new kitchen looks fabulous.
I couldn't have done it without the Kitchens Unlimited team. They captured my style and kept it within my budget.
I just love the materials you used. Were you ever worried how it would look?
No, not at all. My designer provided detailed drawings and made sure I understood everything. Their great service continues after the install. I got a custom kitchen with the exact style and details I wanted.
Wow. It sounds like you're going to miss them.
Not for long. They also do bathrooms.
You can reach the Kitchens Unlimited team at 3550 Summer Avenue or on the web at kitchensunlimited.net.
We don't just say we care, we show we care. At Ortho One, that's the motto we live by. We place an emphasis on seeing our patients as quickly as possible without sacrificing quality in the care that each patient deserves. Our experienced orthopedic physicians, all of whom are surgeons, display a genuine interest in your personal health. A concern for your time and a friendly, skilled staff are what you can expect every time you visit one of our offices in Arlington, Collierville, and Olive Branch. Fast, quality care. That's the Ortho One difference. Check them out at ortho1.org.
I'll tell you what, Shane, I'm eating some more of these pimentos burgers, the sliders with the bacon, the pimento cheese on there. Got to go check out Pimentos, 6450 Poplar Avenue, 3715 South Houston Levee, out in Collierville. They're open till 9 o'clock at night now, and on Sundays they're open till 9 o'clock. Great place to go. They're going to put they've got, you can buy beer up there, you can get wine, and they've got great food. They cook it all fresh at Pimento's Kitchen. You will love it. If you know Holiday Ham, you know the story. Don Jordan, Trey Jordan, 1993, back over at Poplar and Perkins, they started it. And if you like those honey-baked hams, and you like the glazed hams, they put them on the map along with the pimento cheese. Margaret, you and Mr. Jordan and Trey, it's the best pimento cheese I've ever had. It's on the list. If you're walking the Green Mile, Shane, you're going to have that pimento cheese, and also their 901 steak sandwich. Oh my goodness, if you like the Philly cheesesteak sandwiches and all, check out that. It absolutely melts in your mouth, and they do great catering. Heather and the crew here at Pimentos, 6450 Poplar Avenue and 3715 South Houston Levee. They catered our meeting at the Newber Y yesterday. We were getting ready for our big campaign kickoff here, and they had the taco bar yesterday, and it was so good I was eating part of the plate. It was delicious. All right, let's get back to the discussion here with Jimmy Hodge from Chicago, Uncle Charlie down in Monroe, Louisiana. And Jimmy, I don't know if you had a chance to hear, but Uncle Charlie's got a proposal for the SEC schedule to be changed to where every team will get a chance to play. If you've stayed at school 4 years, you'll play at every stadium at least one time. And Uncle Charlie, if you could give him a quick little 30-second elevator speech. And Jimmy, I want your feedback and what you think about it.
Yeah, sure, Jimmy. First, it's a pleasure to be on with you. I've heard you a lot on these broadcasts and podcasts, and you're very knowledgeable and do an excellent job. But just real briefly, it just eliminates the divisions in the SEC, and you're going to have the top two teams playing the championship. But scheduling-wise, each team, we have 3 permanent opponents. It's similar to how they do in basketball now after getting rid of the divisions. And then with the other 10 teams, you would play 5 of them each year, either in a home and home, play 2 years and then off 2 years, and then play the other 5, or play every other year, rotating the 5 and get the home and home that way. So, like Rob said, yeah, every 2 years. Every 4 years, every player that's there for 4 years will play every team at least twice, and in every stadium at least once. Just think it would be very good for the players, the fan base, recruiting, and everything. What are your thoughts on that?
Jimmy, you there?
Yes, I'm just having a hard time hearing, but I did hear kind of the core of the idea. I think it's great that every player would be able to play in every stadium in the conference if they stayed there 4 years. I know that the SEC office has been listening to several proposals along that line, and the one that I have heard is that each school would have 3 permanent opponents like they have now. I think they have 2. Instead, you would have 3 in which you would play them, obviously, home and home every 2 years. And so that would leave, you would play 5 other schools on a 1-year rotating basis, or you might even just play them on a home and home on a 2-year cycle, and then when that one would end, you would play the remaining 5 schools on a 2-year cycle. So that way, again, every player, if you played 4 years, would be able to visit every stadium in the conference. I think it's a great idea.
I do too. A question for both of y'all. And well, I guess I have to ask you this because Lloyd, Uncle Charlie's in favor of an 8-game schedule. And are you in favor of 8, or do you want to go to 9?
Well, it doesn't really seem to matter because Saban's kind of been the lone wolf out here for the better part of 10 years. He's always wanted 9. But I think one other coach in the past year or 2 expressed some interest in 9, but that's been it. That's just kind of been how it is. And if you don't have any more coaches than that interested in it, I just don't see how it's going to go anywhere. Now, I know a lot of coaches are very concerned about this proposal because if you did that, then a lot of schools would be in danger of making a bowl game. And for schools that aren't perennial championship contenders, that's a big deal to make it to a bowl game. You obviously want to go 4-0 in your non-conference, or at worst 3-1. And then if you can play 500 in the league, you're going to make that requirement. So I know that's a big concern there. But then I think for a lot of fan bases of the perennial championship contenders is that if you go to 9, you can almost be assured that 9th game is going to be a team that's ranked. because that's the penalty you pay for playing in the stronger conference. Whereas these other conferences, they're going, oh yeah, the SEC should be playing 9. Never mind the fact that if just about maybe 11 or 12 of the SEC teams play 9 in your conference, they probably go 7-2. So it's easy to yell about that from the outside. So it's kind of a catch-22 because if you're Florida, you get Florida State every year, and after Norvell's been there a year or two, Florida State's going to be back to Florida State, I think. Same thing happens with South Carolina. You get Clemson every year. I think Georgia Tech's going to be much better under Collins in the next couple of years, so that's not going to be a pushover for Georgia anymore. So, there's arguments both ways.
All right, next question is, there are going to be arguments from a lot of schools. Well, we already play the toughest schedule in the league, and our rival or this rival or whoever, they don't play the tough teams. And if you look at this past year, you had early in the season, about mid-October, you had Auburn, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, and LSU. And they were all ranked in the top 10 in the rankings. Alabama had to play Auburn and LSU. Auburn had to play LSU, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. LSU played Auburn, Alabama, and Florida. And Georgia played Auburn, Florida, and that was it. Okay, so that and Auburn had to play them all 4. Auburn had 4 losses. They didn't have a really good offense this year. That was their problem. Defense was good, but Alabama and LSU, they've developed identities on offense that are among the best in the history of college football. LSU, probably the greatest team that's ever played the game in a single season. Georgia, Kirby Smart likes to get 21, 24 points and sit on the lead in the second half. He ain't going to be able to do that forever, okay? So what do y'all think? I'll start with you, Uncle Charlie. What do you think will happen? Let's say we did this. Let's say that in the 2020 season, we've adopted the Uncle Charlie SEC schedule realignment. Everybody plays everybody. Everybody gets a trophy now. Everybody plays everybody at least once every 4 years at the opposing team's stadium. I think interest goes through the roof, and we take care of this problem with attendance declining, and we're all better off. But I'll let you go first, and then Jimmy, I'd like your response.
Hey, Rob, let me jump in real quick.
Okay.
I can hear you much clearer than I can Charlie.
Okay.
So I wanted you to kind of repeat very quickly the specifics of Charlie's idea of, every school playing everybody within 4 years.
Yeah, Charlie, go back over that.
How many permanent opponents, and then the others that would be on a 2 years?
Okay. Yeah, and Rob, I'm having the same trouble hearing Jimmy very well at all either. It's very, very faint.
I think Bigfoot's got hold of the phone lines.
Maybe so. But, yeah, I mean, just in the simplest terms, so, keeping the 8-game schedule, there would be each team would have 3 permanent opponents that they play every year. Of course, that would be the subject of much debate, I'm sure, as to which 3 those were, but for each team. But I think it could be hashed out. And then, then the remaining 10 teams, aside from your 3 permanent opponents, you'll play 5 of them. I think you were saying the same thing from what you had heard elsewhere. So, a home and home, or play them every other year. And that gives you playing each of the other 10 teams 2 out of every 4 years, whether it's year 1 and year 3 or year 2 and year 4, or a home and home and then off 2 years and then back on. So you're going to be playing everybody a lot more frequently, obviously.
Jimmy, frequency. I think the exciting thing he's talking about is the frequency of playing everybody in the league more often as opposed to 8 or 12 years apart from visiting their stadium.
Oh, yeah, it's a great idea. I think I would rather go with the 5 opponents. I would like to see that in consecutive years, because that way you would develop consistency. You would get those 2 games out of the way, because home and home. Because every other year you would have 2 completely different teams. You know, if you spaced it 2 years apart, and of course you're going to have a different team every year anyway. But that would be the difference between the 2 teams that you playing each other on consecutive years would be much less, I think, than it would if they played 2 years apart. But nonetheless, it's a great idea. But the reason we have that, I think this idea has become kind of a priority, is because otherwise a lot of discussion had taken place involving Auburn moving to the east, and and as an Alabama fan, that would be fine. But the only problem with that would be, and it could happen, let's say Alabama and Auburn played the final regular season game, and they were both undefeated, or they were each contenders for their respective division titles. And let's say Alabama was 11-0, Auburn was 10-1. They upset Alabama to win it. You could possibly have those schools playing again the very same way, the very next week for the SEC championship. But I don't think anybody at either one of those schools would like that possibility of playing each other in back-to-back weeks. But other than that, I think we're at a point now, if this continues, the SEC has won, the SEC West champion has won the championship game 10 out of the last 11 seasons. And if this continues, I think we're going to have to reach a point where, from a scheduling standpoint, we do it like what we've talked about. But I think you're just going to have the 2 highest-ranked teams play in the championship game unless the East champion starts winning some games.
Yeah, and I got to say to Uncle Charlie and to Jimmy, I don't think there are enough nitroglycerin heart pills, and Fred Sanford would be going, Elizabeth, this is the big one. Auburn and Alabama playing twice in 7 days. That's just too much. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you'd have to have Grady and Aunt Esther over there to handle that one.
Yeah. I mean, you might have to move that game to earlier in the season. I know that people can't imagine doing that, but it happened one year with Ohio State and Michigan, and it just happened this year with Cincinnati and Memphis as well, playing back-to-back weeks. But obviously, neither of those is Alabama-Auburn. Although some people up north might dispute
that's a really good
the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry being the top one in the country, but it hasn't been much of a rivalry lately, obviously. But
back in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, that's always one little snag there. I thought about that, too, with Alabama and Auburn.
Jimmy, talk about that comparison.
Yeah, because when those 2 teams played a couple of years in the season opener, they played at midseason, they played late. It didn't matter when they played. It was going to have the attention of the entire nation. And I really wouldn't mind. I wouldn't have any problem with the Iron Bowl being, maybe the second week of October or late 1st of November, or just whenever, because we've been seeing, especially, Auburn used to have that situation until they created divisions in '92 where they had Amen corner. Yeah. They had Florida, Georgia, and Alabama back to back. I mean, that's insane. I think you might want to space those games out. And I tell you, the last several years, especially the last 2 years, with Alabama's schedule being backloaded after LSU get Mississippi State the next week, and from my perspective, that's Mississippi State's the worst team you could possibly play if you're Alabama the very week after LSU, because they are so physical, they are so big, and Tua got injured the last 2 years. I mean, when you play them, you're going to need some time to recover, and then you have Auburn 2 weeks later. So, I think I'm fine with looking at some flexibility in scheduling some of these big games, because big games are big games.
Yeah.
And no matter where they are on the schedule, and the hardcore college football fans are going to be all over it, no matter when they play.
Yeah, guys, listen, this has been a great discussion. We're going to get y'all back on again here in the future. We've got to take a commercial break. We're going to come back with Coach Tommy Tuberville to talk some more college football. And, guys, this has been a lot of fun. And we're going to post this up on the website, sidelines.live. Uncle Charlie, with your permission, your dissertation about SEC realignment. I think it's an exciting topic. And we'll be right back with more on sidelines.live.
All right.
Hey, Rob, if you can, ask Tommy what he thinks about rescheduling maybe that Iron Bowl possibility.
Hey, Jimmy, if you want to hang on the line, and we'll let you go, Uncle Charlie. Jimmy, hang on the line. I'll let you talk with Coach Tuberville.
Okay.
All right, we'll be right back. Thank you. You know what my man cave needs?
What's that, Rob?
A giant screen TV with surround sound.
You should go to gaddishome.com.
That's right. They can do all of this without costing us a fortune. They can also put in the security cameras and outdoor lighting you've been wanting forever.
What are you waiting for?
Hey, check them out at gaddishome.com or on our website, sidelines.live. That's Gaddis Home Innovation.
Where did you get that show here?
Cargo safe. Cargo safe.
Where are the best liquor deals?
Cargo safe. Cargo safe.
Your new kitchen looks fabulous.
I couldn't have done it without the Kitchens Unlimited team. They captured my style and kept it within my budget.
I just love the materials you used. Were you ever worried how it would look?
No, not at all. My designer provided detailed drawings and made sure I understood everything. Their great service continues after the install. I got a custom kitchen with the exact style and details I wanted.
Wow, it sounds like you're going to miss them.
Not for long. They also do bathrooms.
You can reach the Kitchens Unlimited team at 3550 Summer Avenue or on the web at kitchensunlimited.net.
All right, Rob Brown back here with you on the sidelines, and we're going to have Jimmy Hodge from Chicago is going to stay on with us, talk with Coach Tommy Tuberville. And real quick, before we get back to both of y'all, I want to say something about one of our sponsors, Rocky's Alterations, 1866 Poplar Crest Cove in Memphis, right behind Mecca Eye Care. I've taken everything in there, from even some of my hunting gear. They've repaired that, and that stuff takes a beating, and it looks great. They also do women's alterations, men's sport coats, blazers, suits, dress shirts, dress pants, Rocky's Alterations. Everybody knew his uncle, Richard Capadia, a great American. This is his nephew, Rocky's Alterations, 1866 Poplar Crest Cove, across from another one of our sponsors, Pimentos, 6450 Poplar Avenue and 3715 South Houston Levee in Collierville. Pimentos, I tell you what, the owner, Trey Jordan, a proud Baylor Bear graduate, roommate at Baylor with ESPN's Trey Wingo. And I'd like to get Trey on the show if you're listening, or Trey Wingo on the show, Trey Jordan. But anyway, let's go back. And Coach Tuberville, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, before we get to talking some football, tell us how the campaign is going down in Alabama It is, I'm sure, an intense fight, something you're used to, though.
Drive to the finish. Rob, it's 38 days and fourth quarter. We got a game plan together, getting ready for all the media buy, radio, TV, digital, and a lot to it. I mean, it's a huge game plan that you put together along with about 10 or 12 other people and all over the state. I don't stop. As a matter of fact, I'm in multiple shows today, not too far from you. So really enjoying it. You can want to see anything about our campaign, just go on TommyForSenate.com and look it up.
All right. Looking forward to it. We'll tag out at the end of the show with another mention so people can support you and find out what's going on down in Alabama. Coach Jimmy Hodge from Chicago and I have been on the phone with Uncle Charlie before that about a proposal, and I think I've mentioned it to you before, of the SEC to where everybody would play everybody more frequently. We mentioned it to you last week, and we didn't get into it enough, I guess. What kind of opposition would you get most likely from the SEC commissioner and the power brokers in the SEC in Birmingham?
Well, if you just mixed it up or played more games, what are you asking?
Well, if you had the proposal is everybody, if you stay at a school for 4 years, you're going to visit every stadium in the SEC at least one time. You would have 3 permanent opponents. Auburn's 3 permanent would be Alabama, Georgia, and Florida, but they would get back to playing Tennessee more frequently because that's a big rivalry for Auburn, as is the Florida. And from being a coach at Auburn and Ole Miss, Auburn certainly recruits the state of Florida heavily, and in some years signs more kids out of Florida, certainly out of Georgia, than they do Alabama.
Yeah, that would be a good rotation. As you know, there's certain games that have to be played. And so, as you said, you'd have your games every year that you'd have to lock horns with for your traditional rivals. But they're eventually going to have to start looking for some diversity, something different. And I think, especially the SEC, they have their tradition, which is a great tradition of a lot of games. But I think you could probably mix it up a little bit. The thing that really affects what's going on, though, is all these games early in the year where all the money's made, where they do off-campus, no home and home. Those things have really gotten involved. But I think more and more fans are wanting the games to go back to campus, and I think that's what's important for college football.
All right. Jimmy, from your perspective, looking at realignment, there's people that like 8 games. Nick Saban likes the 9 games. Give your opinion on this.
Well, again, I think it's a situation where the teams that really have a tough rivalry game that is not a conference game, like Florida would play Florida State, of course. They do every year. And I'd mentioned earlier that Florida State, I think, under Norvell is going to be back to normal in a couple of years. So that's going to be really the same as an SEC game. And, of course, if you're South Carolina, your rivalry game's Clemson, and that's certainly a heavyweight contest. So if you have a really strong rival, in-state rival that's in another conference, you're probably not crazy about going to 9 conference games. But if you're in a situation where that's not the case, you'd be more open to 9. And Coach, I've mentioned that you hear these fans and media from other conferences. Oh yeah, they want the SEC to play 9 conference games because they know there's a good chance that 9 conference game is going to be against a ranked team, and there's a good chance for a loss there. And they want as little SEC participation in a possible playoff as possible.
Coach, what do you think about that? Are you there, Coach?
Yeah, I said that, there's a lot of interesting things that you could do with the schedule. The big thing people have to understand, and I know there's some, as I said, I think there needs to be some diversity. There needs to be some things changed up a little bit for the imagination. But, It is so hard to do schedules. I was involved in them for 40 years. And, you know, you can go out there and it's like anything. If you want to go somewhere to eat, your wife wants to go somewhere else, you got division in the staff there, and it's hard to make a decision. So, you have so many people that got their hand in the face of this schedule. And you got commissioners, you got ADs, you got presidents, then you got fans, and you got coaches. It is so hard to get anybody to budge on anything, but it's great to talk about it, I'll tell you.
Well, I think the divisions almost, the SEC West is one we mentioned, 10 of the last 11 SEC championships, and the East for a long time had a stranglehold, especially when Steve Spurrier was in Florida. But you know, we'll see what happens. But it's a fun topic. I'm going to ask you, Jimmy, and then I want Coach you to respond. We're looking at college football. I read an interesting article, and I want both of y'all's opinion on it, you know, feedback about what's causing a decline in attendance in college football. Now, it's not happening at Auburn or Alabama or Georgia, really, but there are problems. And Charlotte Wilder, SI.com, Sports Illustrated writer, had a piece out. She went to Gainesville, Florida, Clemson, South Carolina, and Columbus, Ohio. And she tried to go by some fraternity houses and talk to the kids about what's going on. She couldn't talk to them because they had a risk manager and all this, you know, it's just paperwork and just all this interference. And where you wanted to tailgate, well, now you can't tailgate there. Ever since 9/11, taking away more and more places that you went to. And Jimmy, the reviews, the timeouts, the TV times, for the fan, it's tough. For the school, for the coach, for the program, it's exposure. Where do you draw the line, and what's the takeaway from all this? I'll go with you first, Jimmy, and then after that, Coach, I'd love to hear your response.
Well, first thing I meant to say this, I just wanted to tell Coach Tuberville that you're my kind of politician. You're not a politician, first of all, and you're on the Trump train, and you talk common sense, which is in short supply in the swamp there, so I wish you luck. And secondly, you'll never remember this. I want to get this in real quick, but I met you right when you first got the Ole Miss job. I was the Adidas team sales guy in South Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and I talked to you for about 20 minutes at the Mississippi High School Football Coaches Association clinic. You had just gotten the Ole Miss job, and I think you'd come from A&M, and you're talking about, of all places, A&M not having a grass field. They played on that old-fashioned artificial turf, and it used to kill your back. And we had a great discussion, but I also wanted to tell you my cousin at the time was the CEO at Baptist Hospital in Oxford, and one of his best friends did the bypass surgery on David Cutcliffe, and I know he talked with you a lot, and I know he mentioned you had a real tough time deciding between whether to stay at Ole Miss or go to Auburn. But I enjoyed the conversation greatly.
Coach, you there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you hear what Jimmy said?
Yeah, it was kind of going in and out on me there. I didn't hear it real good, but can you delay it? Can you kind of give me the synopsis?
Yeah, Jimmy, see if we're having a little bit of trouble. I think Bigfoot's on the line. Something's wrong with it. But Jimmy was talking about he was the Adidas field rep for the state of Texas, and had talked to you at one of the coaches' conventions when you first got the Ole Miss job. That's Jimmy Hodge up in Chicago.
The Mississippi High School Coaches Football Coaches Clinic when you just got the job.
Now, yeah, he was talking about the Mississippi High School Coaches Clinic when you first got the Ole Miss job. Jimmy was the Adidas field rep, so he remembered talking to you and has met you before and said he had about a 20-minute conversation he really enjoyed. So I don't know why we're having problems tonight, but did you hear that? And you probably remember it. You've got a memory like an elephant.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can remember the early stages of Ole Miss. Of course, we made over a clinic and met everybody in the world. And that was back in the days before, Nike was just kind of going pretty good, and we were looking for somebody to help us out. And I remember Jimmy. Yeah, I remember that. And of course, he worked for Adidas, but how times have changed. Now you got several people in the business in terms of shoes, and helped a lot of people out. But got a lot of great memories of those early years of being a head coach. Thought I knew what I was doing, but you find out real quick. I mean, things that you thought you knew, you really didn't know anything about being a head coach. You might be a good assistant, but head coach, man, it's a lot different.
Coach, I'll ask you this question. When you were a coordinator and you at Miami under Jimmy Johnson and then Dennis Erickson, then you went to Texas A&M in '94. You were defensive coordinator under R.C. Slocum. When you become a head coach, how much do you actually get to coach compared to when you were a coordinator? And where do you draw the line? Because you were brilliant as a head coach in not micromanaging. But where do you draw that line?
Assistants. Sometimes you make mistakes and don't get the guys you felt like they could do the job, but they couldn't. They weren't quite as good as what you thought, and then you had to do a lot more of it. But if you've got a good set of coaches, and that allows you to work with the media, the alumni, and then obviously the offense, defense, and kicking game, do everything around the football program. It really gives you a chance to have a great overall program. It's the coaches that finally run the offense or defense and be a head coach. I just don't know how to do it. I mean, there's not enough time today to do what you got to do as a head coach, but then you got to spend half or all of your time trying to get an offense or defense ready with all the recruiting and all things that go along with it. It's very hard.
Yeah. Jimmy, Coach Tuberville told us a story a few weeks back. I don't know if you heard this. 1986-87, the assistant strength coach at Arkansas, Ed Orgeron, Coach called him, left him a message. He called him back, and he ended up being hired by Jimmy Johnson and the staff down at Miami. And that's a heck of a story. And Coach, last week we didn't get a chance to do it, but Jimmy and I both would love to hear you talk about Ed Orgeron, the journey this past year, what may be the best team in the history of college football, LSU winning the national championship. And obviously they've lost a lot of coaches and players since then, but I think Coach O and the LSU can handle it, don't you?
Yeah, I think Ed's on the right track. Of course, he's been there a while, not just as a head coach, but as an assistant, and then, of course, he's an interim. I think it was a storybook year for LSU, and they had a very good football team built with a transfer quarterback. And if you go back and look at the teams that have been very good over the last few years, transfer quarterbacks have been a big part of that equation. I think that's the one thing that's probably helped a lot of teams and schools because of the portal. But that being said, now, they have those great receivers, have great DBs. I didn't think LSU would, to win a national championship and to have a little bit better than average defensive line, and that's what they were. They weren't like Alabama's defensive line the last few years, or they weren't even close to Auburn's defensive line this past year. So they outscored people is what they did. You weren't going to beat them because if that quarterback was on any at all, they were going to score a lot of points. And even with the defense not being as good as what normally is for a national championship team, they were good enough to get by. But I tell you what, those receivers and that quarterback, they were unbelievable.
They really were. By the way, Coach, I got to say, pound for pound, the best value, if I'm, looking at buying somebody or a stock at a discount that had a lot of value, pound for pound, the best player, and I know who the best, Carlos Dansby, put him aside in a separate category, but pound for pound, the best player that you discovered out of Viger or Blunt was a 6'1", 295-pound defensive lineman who was a heck of a basketball player. I think he led the state of Alabama in rebounding. His initials are SM, Sinderic Marks.
He was good. I tell you what, there was all kind of. We got several D linemen from down in that area. Sinderic Marks was one. I guess the best of them was another kid I watched play basketball. Nobody was recruiting him because his grades weren't real good, but it was Nick Fairley. And I took Nick and Sinderic Marks and DeMarco McNeil They were all from the Mobile area, Mobile School District. It's hard to find those D linemen, but I tell you what, those 3 kids right there, you could build a football team around each one of them.
You're right. And Coach Jimmy, like your thoughts on this. LSU winning the national championship this year. They've lost Dave Aranda. He's now the new head coach at Baylor, the defensive coordinator. Offensive coordinator Steve Ensminger, who you had on your staff for many years at Auburn, Coach Steve Ensminger. He was very humble and quiet, didn't really get a lot of recognition, but he knows a lot about coaching. And he was there with Joe Brady. Joe Brady's gone. Jimmy, what do you see out of LSU, in your opinion, in this coming year and in the future?
Well, it's obvious who they bring in as the passing game coordinator is going to be huge because Brady kind of came out of nowhere. You know, he worked under Moorhead at Penn State with, I think, Trey McSorley and, you know, a couple other good players there. You know, he obviously learned his lessons well, and Moorhead had a great reputation as an offensive coordinator, and now he's the new OC at Oregon. So I'd read a couple of extensive columns about Brady's background, and he's just a sponge. You know, he just picked up everything everywhere he went. His first mentor was Jimmy Laycock, who he played under at William and Mary, and he was a wide receiver there. And again, you know, with the Saints, he obviously learned a lot from Sean Payton, who's one of the great offensive coaches in the sport. And he was around greatness every day with Drew Brees. So he's going to be awfully tough to replace. And, you know, I haven't heard much about who's in the running maybe to replace him, but that's going to be a huge key. And obviously, you know, defensive coordinator is that's also kind of up in the air. So it's clearly going to come down to that. And then no small factor there that not only did you lose the Heisman Trophy winner, but you also lost 9 outstanding players who are going to enter the draft early.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. Coach and Jimmy, both, thank you so much for being on the show with us. Coach, as we leave, tell people how they can find out about your campaign for the U.S. Senate Republican primary coming up March 3rd in Alabama.
Well, just go on TommyPercent.com and read about it. And it's a very important election. We've got, number one, we've got to get President Trump reelected, and then we've got to give him some help. All you got to do is look at that clown show going on in Washington, D.C. right now. We're wasting millions of dollars.
Yeah.
With people up there that, I mean, it's absolutely, it's crazy. It's a reality show.
I got you. Hey, guys, thank you both so much. Look forward to having you on again next week. You've been listening to Sidelines, and want to say on the way home, 3327 Jackson Avenue, Cardozi Liquor. Go by and see our friend Fig. They've got your beer, wine, and your liquor for entertainment this weekend. A lot of college basketball on. Super Bowl is a week from Sunday. Got a whole lot more. Before you know it, signing day, February 5th coming up. Got the rest of college basketball Final Four, spring practice. Man, it's like trying to take a drink of water from a fire hydrant. We got so much information for you. Sidelines.live, Snakeskin Cowboy, great job. Audrey, heck of a job on the music. And thank you to all of our sponsors, especially our title sponsor, DWAM, Duncan Williams Asset Management. They are Memphis strong. Check them out on our website, sidelines.live. Have a great weekend, everybody.